We are.
Shalom, wholeness to the whole family online and those of us who are seeking unify in the spirit of unity and wholeness. I'd like to begin with opening us up today with first, I want us to think for a moment about the term we usually greet one another with and the term that we use to close with, and this is wholeness. And when you look at the definition of wholeness, it means to assemble things together and that they work harmoniously together. And when you just take a consideration of like bicycle, when you look at the wheel rolling, every spoke within is moving, harmonious. So when we think about wholeness, we got to think in terms of harmony and oneness. And that is the objective. That is the objective that I think all of us recognize, in the pursuit of trying to manifest as a reality within self. This all begins with self. And then as you manifest it within self, the objective is to what? Manifest it outwardly or to expand that unity, oneness, and that wholeness. And in the process of that, we expand from an individual to 1, 2, 3 family, and then a city, a state, and the world. And I don't see that as being something that is impossible. I see that as something that has been in that cycle for a good season. And I want to give first a quote before I get into the point from a book that I think very highly of. It's written by Bruce Lipton, and it's called Spontaneous Evolution. And there is a chapter where I want to read from to open us up in terms of this wholeness and give us some keys about this. This chapter is called Changing the Guard and Regrowing the Garden. Changing the guard and regrowing the garden. And he starts off talking about there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news, civilization as we know it, is about to end. Whoa. Now the good news, civilization is, as we know it, is about to end. So we're talking about the good news and the bad news is the civilization as we know it is about to end. Then he goes on to say, true, the seemingly insurmountable crisis that currently challenge our existence can be taken as an obvious portent of civilization's imminent demise. However, below the turmoil evident on the surface, there's an even deeper, more profound reason as to why our civilization is ending. The core beliefs upon which we have built our world are leading us to our extinction. That's the bad news. Now, that is to simply say that those core beliefs that we have held, those core beliefs that we have depended upon, those core beliefs that we've built our whole, essence of everything we wanted to accomplish and everything that we have been through was based upon those core beliefs. Now, so that means then those beliefs are a testimony for us that those beliefs have to be eradicated, have to be completely discarded because they don't work.
Yes, ma'am.
They don't work. And there's no way around that. Ain't nothing good to say about them. Now, leading from that, we're going to go to what he goes on to say. He said, The good news is that the New Age science has drastically revived our current paradigm's core beliefs. By definition, revision of paradigmatic beliefs inevitably provokes a profound transformation of civilization as its population assimilates the newer, more life-sustaining awareness. More good news is that ours is not the first Western civilization to rise and then fall out of favor. Three earlier versions of civilization, animism, polytheism, monotheism, preceded and contributed to today's culture of scientific materialism. So there is precedent for the furthering of our evolution. Now we come into the key point. As with any living organism, the birth of a civilization is initially characterized by a developmental period during which novel cultural ideas are introduced to the mainstream public. As society matures, effective life-enhancing beliefs become canonized and perceived as cultural law. And these concretized beliefs lead to rigidity in a society's behavior pattern. Over time, a society's fixed beliefs, those core beliefs, inevitably precipitates irresolvable environmental challenges. The first irresolvable environmental challenge is in each and every one of us. That's the first environment that we struggle with.
That's correct.
And cannot change the inner environment. You're not going to have an effect upon the external environment. People or any other thing, impossible. So I'm really asking today to look into the method, the way, the reason, and the simplicity of having to go inwardly to balance and harmonize within ourselves first, so that we can manifest what David was just talking about. As we move on, it says, at this stage of life cycle, the cultural mainstream inherent rigidity expresses itself as an active resistance to change. Even when confronted with life-threatening crisis, inflexibility in a time of upheaval precipitates a rapid decline of the aging society. And we're going to close with this point. We are now speeding toward our third transition of the balance point between the spiritual realm and the material realm. What lies before us when we arrive will be defined by our choice between two alternative paths. We may choose to stay in the same familiar world of dualities, wherein religious fundamentals and reductionist scientists continue to polarize the public. So what we see there is religion and science has been and is the contributors to the polarization that we believe is a part of reality. That knowledge base has been continually polarized. And closing, said, as we return again to the balance point, we may choose to resolve our differences by seeking harmony over polarity, by combining formally factious elements into a unified functional whole. We can open the door, transcend historic dualities, and experience an evolution that will provide for a higher functioning, more sustainable vision of humanity. The potential behind such such a seemingly miraculous resolution is not based upon some pie in the sky Pollyanna thinking. The positive vision supporting this probable future is inherent in the wisdom offered by civilization's basal paradigm. However, we are not speaking of the wisdom of the current civilization's paradigm, a belief misperceptions that directly contribute to today's global chaos. Rather, we are speaking of a new basal paradigm, one based on an integration of new science and ancient spiritual wisdom. While no official name has yet been designated to describe the next version of civilization, we will identify the new basal paradigm as holism. Holism. Now, that takes me to the point I wanted to, and this is quite in depth, but I'm not going to try to get into the in depth. I'm just going to introduce it today. And from this point on, I'm going to continue to keep coming here to simplify, before we bring Eitai on, to simplify the process that has been the stumbling block for us using this dualistic language, trying to explain a holistic way and lifestyle. But I'm going to simplify it, and I'm going to start today to give us some insight in how it can help what Eitai has given us to simplify it. I'm going to start by calling this portion the concept of Adam and Kava. Adam and Kava. And everybody know then that starts with the foundation of the Bible. I say in retrospect to the light of our present worldview of wholeness and introspection to that of dualism, we are now able to comprehend and understand that which has been previously hidden or concealed. Previously hidden and concealed. We are at the point now, by turning to holism, we are able to go in, comprehend, and understand the things that was previously hidden and concealed. They were only hidden and concealed because they was under the influence of duality. You was always trying to figure out which is which way I should go, right or left, up or down. You know, should I, should not. You was always in a cycle that was transit. It wasn't to be eternal, but it appeared that it was to be eternal because we couldn't get out of it. So then we asked the question, does the idea that Eve was created from an organic part of man mean that she is eternally connected to him? That's a question. Are we reminded, or better yet warned, that there can be no survival of one at the expense of the other? Another question. Any significant alteration to the specific relationship between Adam and Eve, or Kava, will create difficulties in their environment that, if not resolved in time, would lead to their extinction. The first environment is internally within yourself, and the second environment out in. When the two above questions put forth, and the relative response provided to those two questions, we must now take a closer review of the creative process of the Genesis narrative. Moreover, and when that is done, we will find that there are two creative acts. The one of Genesis 1:26-27, and the other Genesis 2:21-25. Now, I use the term creative act, but we're going to explain. so that we will understand, has been such a Achilles heel for all of us. Continuing on, quote from Genesis 1:26-27. Over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. Nothing left out. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created him, him, male and female created him. The first narrative reveal. Now I didn't use the word creative here. I said the first narrative reveal. The emanation act or process of being brought forth and confirmed in Genesis 14:18-19, and Hebrews 7:1-3, with Melchizedek being king of wholeness, and they translate king of righteousness. Now, hear me right here, because this is very, very important. What we find here in this narrative is the emanation process and not the creative. But remember, I used the term earlier that there was two creations, but I said we would explain. This is the emanation process and not the creation. This is very significant. Emanate. We're going to deal with the verb in transit, emanate. Latin, meaning to flow, to come out from a source. Verb transit, to admit. Then it says synonym, see spring. And spring in the synonym means or implies rapid or sudden emergence. Rapid or sudden emerging. Emanation, the noun form. 1A, the action of emanating. B, the origination of the world by a series of hierarchical descending radiations from the Godhead, the melanin, through the intermediate stages to matter. Intermediate stages to matter. 2A, something that emanates or is produced by emanation. And now, when we look at this next word, effluence, it's a heavy gaseous element produced by radioactive disintegration. And David's been explaining to us about the 4 stages, the elements of creation. And we never talk about the gas, but we always said that, and it was a scripture in the book of Isaiah, and if someone could look it up for me, because I think it's very significant right here, and it talk about bringing forth, but they brought forth gas. They couldn't bring forth. It's in the book of Isaiah, around the 35th to the 57th chapter of Isaiah. Continue on. When a woman is in conception, there's another term about gas, but here we are talking about the ability to bring forth, to flow forth from as emanation. And we continue with this point by verifying that Melchizedek sets the tone and verifies what we are saying was the revelation of the narrative revealing emanation instead of creation. We go to Genesis 14 and it reads, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. Then we pick up the same Melchizedek, and it's interesting for those of us that study. They spell Melchizedek one way in the Old Testament, but when it gets to the New Testament, in the book of Hebrews 7:1-3, we find they spell Melchizedek another way. Interesting, but nevertheless, it reads, "For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being by interpretation, king of righteousness," and then I'm saying it's king of wholeness, "and after that also king of Salem." Now here we go again. Salem. We're talking about Jerusalem, Jerusalem. But Salem and Jerusalem is what? It means perfection. It means wholeness, which is king of peace. Peace, wholeness. We always greet and we close with the term peace. Without father, without mother. Wait a minute. Where did he come from? Without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abide as a priest continually. This is the emanation process here. That's the first narrative of Genesis 1:26-27. Thereafter, the second narrative conveys the creation and the real which the Lord God had taken from man, made he a woman, and brought her unto the man. Then said, "This is bone of my bone, and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man." Now, this is quite significant here, because now we want to go to the second chapter, verse 21-25. Verse 21-25 said, "And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof." This word "instead" has always troubled me until I thought to look into it, because it just never made sense in that narrative. Instead thereof. Continue on. "And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, made he a woman, and brought her unto the man. And Adam said, This is now bone of my bones," that's plural, bones, "and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman," a woman. So we see the prefix WO, and then we see the suffix MAN, because she was taken out of man. So we see there's a relative relationship there. "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and they were not ashamed." Genesis 2:21-25. This act of creation, we will now define it as being an inorganic reality, characteristic that is the one that simulates. I'll read it again. This act of creation, we will now define it as being an inorganic reality, characteristic that is the one that simulates. Verb, transit, Latin, to copy, represent, to fringe, from similis, like, 1652. Definition 1. That was the etymology. Definition 1. To assume the outward qualities or appearance of, often with intent to deceive, imitate. 2. To make simulation of as a physical system. So we find here two acts that is defined as two creations. But we're saying one is emanation and the other is assimilation. Now, when we stop to think, we've been taught on the line that we wasn't created, that we emanated. So now we can see scripturally, as well as from an alchemical, energetic, allegorical, symbolistic way of viewing this outside of its physical, way of viewing it, we can verify. Couple more points, and then we're going to hold up, because I know this is a lot. In order to gain the essence from these two narratives, we must come to understand the different objectives of the two narratives. In the first creative narrative, it was made clear that each creative element was given a different responsibility. The male, Zachar, and the female, Nikiva, root Nakar. The example is the masculine Zachar is to remember, to mention as a memorial. The female Nakar is to penetrate, perforate, specify, appoint, express with holes, name, pierce, strike through. That's the feminine element. The more we understand the two creative views or narratives, the male Zakar and the female Nakar, from the correct point of reference, which is wholeness, rather than that of dualism. Whenever we acquire the ability and is able to ingest and digest the correct narrative from an organic reality characteristic which is dominant, and it is set deeply, securely, and permanently. It doesn't change. That's the dominant, as opposed to the inorganic, simulated reality characteristic that is what? Recessive, rational, and transient. Rational and transient. The most important connection is the relative relationship between Kava, life giver, or Eve, as the first woman. Kava, a star, to prick or to penetrate, hence to blister, as smarting or eating into, to burn. So we see Kava, and we see the word star is a relative connection and relationship in the energetic realm.
Okay.
In the info realm. We go on to see, whereas the same as female 4357 Nakar, to penetrate, the same word, same idea, to penetrate. I said same word, same definition, to penetrate, to perforate, to pierce, to specify, designate, to blaspheme. Thus we are able to see all these scriptural verses are revealing all of the primary activity that is occurring within the energetic nature as an allegorical element within the realm of dualism existing within oneself. This is not external. All this is taking place within self. As we review the second act of the creative element of the process, it is described as a deep sleep, tardema, with the root radam. Herein we find that the creative act is being brilliantly and cleverly cloaked in allegorical symbolism by our ancestors, our higher or divine self. The deep sleep is the allegorical symbolism itself, meaning to stun, to stupefy with sleep or death, to be in a deep sleep, to cast into a dead sleep, thus setting in motion the unprecedented time cycle called the captivity or slavery under what we call the Euro-Gentile or the aberrant humanity. This verifies what we are talking about in terms of the two creative acts. Then we're going to close out with this point. We said the allegorical symbolism. And the word allegory is a noun, the expression by means of symbolic, fiction, figures, and actions of truth or generalizations about human existence. So we understand what an allegory is. It's symbolic, fictional figures and actions of truth or generalization about human existence. It's not an absolute historical as we had been told. That has nothing to do with it being played out at a particular time cycle wherein that we would see how this allegorical, brilliant, cleverly cloaked symbolism used by, the great and divine forethought of the ancestors or our higher self or our divine self, how this was laid out to prepare the way so that the flaw of duality could be what? Acknowledged by virtue of us living the assimilated reality.
Yes, sir.
Believing that it was the absolute way that the universe and everything was to function. We find now it just wasn't that way. Going back to what I said about the bicycle, and when the spokes, you understand, turn, every one of the spokes in the wheel turn. They don't decide, I'm not going to do it. Everything because it all connected together.
That's correct.
Allegorical, the term allegorical as an adjective, having hidden spiritual meanings that transcend the literal sense of a text, and it's a sacred text. I'm saying it ain't sacred, the text of wholeness. Because I explained to us about how the word sacred played into the word holy.
Yes.
Nothing sacred but the text of wholeness. That's the true text, wholeness. There ain't no sacred text. So, in closing, the scriptural references below set the stage for the concept of the deep sleep that led to the division of male and female and the whole human family under the influence of good and evil, thus establishing humanity's direct contact with the knowledge of rationalism/dualism as stated in the references below. So we are whole at this point, and we're going to pick up here and break down what the deep sleep was and how it fits within the social system and how we have played this out to the letter. So we would have a greater understanding of the process, how things are unfolding from the infold, energetic realm of true conscious reality. So we'll hold at this point, and we'll come back. We're going to continue this until we make sure that everybody have a good handle of what we have talked about, and it's just going to aid everything that will be built, and expanded from this point of our reference. So with that, Eitai, wholeness.
Yeah.
Okay, returning to the point of being brought under this dualistic, rationalistic way of viewing things. We pick up Genesis 2:9, Genesis 2:16 and 17 to make our connections here. Out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. Tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This is where we find this concept here. We pick up verse 16 and 17. The Lord commanded to man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. Now, here we find in the consumption of hearing, consuming, however you want to do it, from a physical or spiritual, through the mouth, ingestion, or ingestion through the ear, the mouth, the ear, we find is both consumption. One is physical and one is energetic or spiritual. But herein lies the problem. When this is, when this occurs, then this is what happens. These references confirm for us the end result of the consumption, accepting and applying the knowledge of good and evil, or the dualistic approach to one's life's development. Is going to be problematic. There's no way you can apply good and evil, right and wrong, up and down, or rationalistic dualism, and it do not create a problem. It goes all the way back to the very first portion when we read do the concept of Eve. We have to go back. There's the idea that Eve was created from an organic part of man, means that she is eternally connected to him. Are we reminded, or better yet warned, that there can be no survival of one at the expense of the other? Any significant alteration to the specific relationship between Adam and Eve will create difficulty in their environment that, if not resolved in time, would lead to their extinction. Now, we must understand here, we have to understand here, just like the consumption of the good and evil, consuming from the mouth, the physical, and from the ear with the energetic. The environment here is internal, the energetic environment, and the external is in the physical realm where we interact with the rest of the creation, whether it be the human species, the animal species, the plant species. You cannot survive without one or the other. You can't destroy one without the other, because you are all connected. We got to understand the significance of unity and oneness and wholeness. This is just not a religious kind of, this is far beyond that. This is life development, life sustaining and perpetuating. So as we continue on, we go on to say there was a price that had to be paid and a consequence that must occur when one depart from the original order of completeness, perfection, and wholeness. There's a price. So we go back now and we understand emanation and we understand creation. So we can see the flaw, and we can understand now how within the flaw there had to be a transient existence in the physical realm. It couldn't be eternal. It had to be transient because we had what? Tried to come and create without it being whole. Whatever the flaw was, duality, however it was, it could not exist eternally. It had to have an end to it. Continuing on. Thus, without the knowledge of wholeness, oneness, life will be miserable and impossible to live eternally with or without a mate. With or without a mate. So we see the significance of unification within yourself. That's your true mate. You know, your true mate is you being unified in oneness.
Absolutely, Nasik.
You've been divided into duality. So the merging of the marriage is the remarrying your unity and oneness of yourself with all of creation.
Yes.
All of creation. And then when you take a mate, and they've done the same thing, you know,
yes, yes,
sky's the limit, so to speak.
Absolutely.
With the loss of the knowledge of wholeness, the end result would only be filled with failure, hardship, and the consequences of man that he must incur. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. Genesis 2:21. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. Humanity has been trying to live together without the knowledge and understanding of the influence and effect of the deep sleep of Genesis 2:21. When this word is reviewed in the Hebrew, it is tardema, with the root of the term deep sleep, resh, dalet, mem, pronounced radam, meaning to stun, to make senseless. Now, we always say, well, that don't make sense. Now we can see why it doesn't make sense. Because in duality, nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense when you are in duality. Even though it has we've been programmed to believe that because things has a relative meaning in the physical realm, it makes sense in the energetic realm. Not so. And not so at all. Not so. To make stupid, groggy, weak, and unsteady on the feet or in action, or insensible, stupid, slow of mind, obtuse, lacking sharpness or quickness of sensibility. This is from the word tardema, the root radam, acting in an unintelligent or careless manner. Does humanity act in an unintelligent or careless manner? All of humanity does.
Okay.
Cannot take care of ourselves because of what? This deep sleep that we haven't understood. So let's go on and see what took place. The symbolic deep sleep and rib taken from man was a metaphor that is representative of the energy consciousness that was separated or taken from man and made here a woman. In scientific terms, the idea means splitting the atom or separating the parts of a whole. Thus, in the process of time, this became the fundamental idea that has been used as a knowledge base to dominate, control certain elements within the creation. When we closely look at Genesis 2:21 and the word instead, now the word instead, it says it clothes up the flesh instead thereof. The word is takat. In Hebrew means to depress, to humble, to be low, to be below, underneath. The actual phrase of taking one of the ribs and closing up the flesh instead thereof is to deliver into anyone's power, to shut up into the power of anyone, so as to depress, to humble, to be below or underneath in power or rank. Let us look a little more carefully with an in-depth evaluation and comprehension of our misunderstanding of the deep sleep and its effect it has had upon the way we viewed and view all things. We use the first word, naked, Aharone, from chapter 2, verse 25. In the idea of smoothness to be becoming, usually in a bad sense, to make crafty, to break to pieces, to pound, especially in large pieces, which is separation and division. The next term, not ashamed, the Hebrew is busha, to be ashamed, to be disappointed, or delayed, and to be confounded, confused. With reference below, we are given the insight and knowledge of the future of all life under the influence of a deep sleep and a social system where everyone is functioning under the influence of good and evil or duality / dualism and are in confusion. Now we go to the deification, how now we see how things has worked out in this deep sleep. Instead of acknowledging the truth about things, we are given the deception about the truth, and that brought us under what you call deception, which will now we accept that which is faulty and invalid to be true and valid. And we find here, saying the serpent. And we know the serpent now has been deified, right? Has been demonized. The serpent is an evil element. But now listen to what it says. And the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, has God said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden. And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the tree of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. Now here, we all know that we've been taught that the serpent is what beguiled or tricked Eve. But now we got to consider, as I said, we have to look at these scriptural references a whole nother way now when we look at wholeness. Well, in the cycle of unity and wholeness, there is no deception. There is no separation. There is no Eve and Adam. Adam and Eve is one unified whole of oneself and their relationship with the creation. So where's the division at? Where's the division at? Where's the serpent being evil and the woman being what? Tricked by the serpent. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for God does know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as God, knowing good and evil. Under duality, we come to know good and we come to know division. We come to know separation. We come to accept that is the way things are. Because I got 2 arms and 2 legs, that means things are in pairs. That means polarity. That means duality. That's how the creation works. Well, the creation and emanation is 2 different things. Emanation is an organic cycle and characteristic of how things work harmoniously and, within a complete unified way to perpetuate itself. But under the inorganic way of rationalism and duality, we can see exactly what we are saying here in terms of how things are what? Made to be seen. One is good, and one is evil. One is right, and one is wrong. But there's no wholeness there. So if there's no wholeness, it's easy to define what's one way and what's another way. Because you have 2 ways or 2 perceptions or 2 minds, and what? Therein lies the problem. Instead of unity and oneness, you are trying to occupy 2 ways of viewing things, having 2 minds. You convince yourself and accept it, the reality that's the way the universe functions, because that's what the definition of dualism said, that the universe is under 2 realities, one of which is good and the other either. That is absolutely not true. But once accepted due to the programming, then you have to what? Defend it as an individual, because you are not unified with the creation. So anything said to you to what? Defend yourself and give credence to yourself, you have to defend the lie. And as you continue to defend the lie, you find yourself what? Being what? Cast, further and further into the deep sleep, into such a state that it becomes almost impossible to awaken some individuals. They would choose death rather than life because they're under the influence of this transit way of viewing things, transit way of doing things. We're going to close on this point here. And when the woman saw the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. So here we find now the woman now deceived by the serpent, and now she turns around and deceives man. So from this point on, women have been placed in this cycle of what? Being what? The problem in humanity, in the physical realm. Relationship don't work, the woman is the cause. She don't understand. She don't this and she don't that. We've made her primary in the world of evil when she was primary in the world of wholeness. But we're still going to make the woman the fault. And then also making yourself be the problem, making yourself be at fault. Acknowledging the flaw, but not knowing it's a flaw and not knowing how to correct it. So we continue on here. He says, and that has been revealed, and what has been revealed above sets the stage for the role that is to be played out within the transition of their energy from wholeness of both man and woman to duality, to function upon the earth. In Genesis 3:1-6 gives us the confirmation that the deep sleep inverted the energy consciousness of the man's wholeness into division and separation or duality, male and female or man and woman. This is why the Hebrew term ish ve'isha means a total or whole person. The term shah, disconnected or separated, has no meaning. It is nothing alone. The term shah, just like the English term woe, is separated from man without its connection to its other part. is inert. This refers back to the term tardema, which was the loss of power, consciousness, causing inertness, having no inherent power of action, motion, or resistance, as inert matter, inactive, inanimate, or without life. This is the tragedy of what happened. See, we stated earlier that, Eve was eternally connected to man, and that one could not survive at the expense of the other. So here we see that without any inherent power, we have become powerless because of our division and our separation from within our own, internal unity of oneness into the physical realm of the environment that we exist today. Having no inherent power of action, motion, or resistance, as inert matter, inactive, inanimate, or without life. This is the spirit or awareness of why the prophets did not want to give a bill of divorcement. The bill of divorce was granted because of the hardness of their hearts, continuously moving away from the idea of wholeness towards separation and division into duality. These two elements that are responsible for providing our world with the knowledge of what is true and what is utter nonsense are contemporary scientific perceptions that have been the source of humanity's belief system. These two elements have been and still are the creators of our concept of right, wrong, or what is permissible and what is not. Our contemporary scientific worldview and religious view have given us our misconception that we have taken to be our reality. So we're going to hold right there, and we will pick up from this point, where we held off today to end this, because it's a lot been said, and we're going to probably need to go back over, crystallize, and even simplify even more. So with that, wholeness.